Despite letters, ciphers, eyewitnesses, and decades of investigation, no one has ever proven who the Zodiac Killer was. How did someone leave so much evidence and still disappear completely? Stay with us because the answer may be more unsettling than you expect. The story of the Zodiac Killer is one of the most closely examined unsolved cases in United States history, not because of the number of lives lost alone, but because of the unusual way the person behind the crimes chose to communicate with the public. Between late 1968 and 1969, a series of fatal incidents in Northern California drew the attention of law enforcement journalists and everyday citizens, all pulled into a mystery that blended fear, puzzles, and deliberate provocation. What set this case apart from others of the era was not just what happened at the crime scenes, but what followed afterward through letters, symbols, and coded messages sent directly to the newspapers. But what investigators didn't realize at the time was that the Zodiac's greatest weapon wasn't the gun. It was control over the narrative. The first confirmed incident linked to the Zodiac occurred on December 20th, 1968, along Lake Herman Road near Benicia, California. Two teenagers who had parked their car were found shot, marking the beginning of a pattern that would later be claimed by the individual calling himself Zodiac. At the time, the case appeared to be another tragic but isolated event, and no clear link to a larger pattern had yet been identified. Law enforcement initially pursued local leads, unaware that this incident would later be publicly claimed as part of a broader series. The sense of isolation changed dramatically in the summer of 1969. On July 4th, another young couple was targeted while sitting in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. This time, one of the victims survived and was able to provide police with a description of what happened. What followed made the case unmistakably different. Shortly after the incident, a man contacted the Vallejo Police Department by phone, calmly taking responsibility for both the Lake Herman Road attack and the Blue Rock Springs shooting. During the call, he provided details that had not yet been released publicly, convincing investigators that the caller had direct knowledge of the events. From this moment forward, the case shifted from a standard criminal investigation into something far more public. The caller did not simply want credit. He wanted attention. That desire became even clearer weeks later, when letters began arriving at newspapers across Northern California. In August 1969, three major publications, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received a letter containing part of a coded message. The writer demanded that the ciphers be printed on the front pages, threatening further harm if his instructions were ignored. These letters weren't just taunts. They were designed to confuse, distract, and possibly protect the Zodiac from ever being identified. These letters introduced the world to the name and symbol that would define the case. Each message began with the phrase, "This is the Zodiac speaking," and ended with a distinctive symbol resembling crosshairs. The symbol would become one of the most recognizable aspects of the mystery, appearing repeatedly in later correspondence. The newspapers ultimately complied, publishing the ciphers asking the public for help in decoding them. This marked a rare moment when an active investigation openly invited mass participation. The first cipher, known as the 408 cipher, was cracked within days by a married couple, Donald and Betty Hardin. They were amateur code breakers. When solved, the message revealed disturbing thoughts, including a statement that the writer enjoyed causing fatal harm and believed that those he had killed would serve him in the afterlife. Despite the chilling content, the message did not reveal the sender's identity. Notably, the final line of the cipher contained a spelling error and omitted the writer's name, which he later claimed was intentional. As public attention intensified, the Zodiac continued to assert his presence through further actions and letters. In September 1969, another couple was targeted at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Unlike the previous incidents, this attack involved close physical contact rather than gunfire. One of the victims survived and later provided important details, including the unusual clothing worn by the attacker, which featured the now famous crosshair symbol. A message was later written on the victim's car door, listing dates and locations of previous attacks, further linking the event to the Zodiac. Only weeks later, in October 1969, the most widely known incident occurred in San Francisco's Presidio Heights neighborhood. A taxi driver named Paul Stein lost his life after being shot while working his shift. This event stood out because it happened in a residential urban area rather than a secluded lover's lane. A witness observed a man leaving the scene and provided a description to the police, though early communication errors complicated the response. Shortly afterward, the Zodiac mailed a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle that included a piece of the driver's shirt confirming his responsibility. As these events unfolded, the letters became increasingly central to the case. The Zodiac sent frequent correspondence filled with taunts, threats, and cryptic commentary. He criticized police efforts, mocked the public's attempts to identify him, and hinted at future actions. Some letters included detailed diagrams, altered symbols, or references to literature and popular culture, suggesting careful preparation. Law enforcement agencies worked alongside cryptographers and linguists, but the messages consistently stopped short of providing concrete clues. This next message would resist decoding for over 50 years, and when it was finally solved, it raised more questions than answers. Among the most famous of these messages was the 340 cipher, sent in November 1969. Unlike the earlier cipher, this one resisted decoding for decades. Despite repeated attempts by professionals and enthusiasts alike, the message remained unsolved until December 2020, when a team of private researchers successfully cracked it using computer-assisted techniques. The decoded text largely reinforced themes seen in earlier letters, expressing amusement at efforts to identify the sender and denying claims that he feared capture. Crucially, it still did not reveal a name. As the correspondence continued into the early 1970s, the frequency of confirmed attacks declined. But the mystery deepened rather than faded. The Zodiac sent letters to additional publications and even addressed police departments directly. Some messages referenced crimes that authorities could not conclusively link to him, raising questions about exaggeration or false claims. Over time, investigators categorized 5 incidents as confirmed, resulting in the loss of 5 lives, while others remained disputed. This uncertainty opened the door to speculation about the true scope of the Zodiac's actions. Some researchers have suggested that the individual may have been active earlier than 1968 or later than 1969, citing similarities to other unsolved cases in California. However, law enforcement agencies have been curious, emphasizing that such connections lack definitive proof. As a result, the official recognized number of victims has remained unchanged, reflecting the commitment to evidence-based conclusions rather than assumption. But none of the names that followed could explain everything. Over the years, investigators focused on several suspects, but none of them could explain all the evidence. Throughout the decades, numerous suspects have been proposed, investigated, and debated. Among them, Arthur Leigh Allen received the most sustained attention. Allen, a former schoolteacher from Vallejo, became a person of interest due to circumstantial factors, including his proximity to certain locations and statements attributed to him by acquaintances. He was questioned multiple times and subjected to searches, but physical evidence never conclusively tied him to the crimes. In 1975, Allen was confined to a state hospital for unrelated offenses, further complicating public perception of his role. Despite extensive scrutiny, Allen was never charged in connection with the Zodiac case. Fingerprints, handwriting comparisons, and later DNA testing failed to produce a definitive match. After his death in 1992, debate continued, fueled by books, documentaries, and films that presented competing interpretations of the evidence. While some investigators remain convinced of his involvement, others point out inconsistencies that prevent certainty. Advances in forensic science have offered new tools, but they have not resolved the mystery. Partial DNA profiles extracted from stamps and envelopes have been tested against known suspects, including Allen, without conclusive results. Even today, the case remains officially open in several jurisdictions. Investigators periodically review new tips, re-examine evidence, and assess emerging theories, but the core facts have not changed. The Zodiac's identity remains unproven, his motives partially understood, and his full history uncertain. What is known is drawn from verified incidents, authenticated letters, and careful analysis rather than speculation. And that may be the Zodiac's final victory, not escaping justice, but ensuring that certainty itself was impossible. The enduring mystery lies not just in who the Zodiac was, but in how effectively he controlled the narrative. By blending real-world actions with calculated communication, he ensured that questions would persist long after the events themselves. Was the Zodiac a single individual acting alone, or someone who carefully shaped a persona larger than reality? Did the letters reveal genuine thoughts, or were they another layer of misdirection? And after all these years, is the truth still hidden in plain sight, waiting for one overlooked detail to finally bring clarity? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more intriguing unsolved cases.